We're all pretty bizarre. Some of us are just better at hiding it. The Breakfast Club wasn't just five kids stuck in Saturday detention. It was a lightning bolt that shattered Hollywood's understanding of what teenage stories could be. Behind John Hughes's deceptively simple premise lurked production chaos that nearly destroyed careers, cast feuds that erupted on set, and studio interference that almost killed the film before it reached theaters. Molly Ringwald battled with the director over scenes she found deeply uncomfortable. Judd Nelson's method acting terrorized his co-stars to the point where security had to intervene. And the film's most iconic moments? They weren't even in the script. Today we're diving deep into 20 weird, shocking, and completely unknown facts about The Breakfast Club that will change how you see this beloved classic forever. Plus, we'll reveal the bonus fact that even the most obsessive fans have never heard, a secret so wild it sounds like fiction. Ready to go behind the closed doors of Shermer High? Let's break it down. The original cast was completely different. The Breakfast Club, almost never existed. John Hughes originally wrote the roles for John Cusack and his sister Joan Cusack, but everything changed when the studio asked him to film 16 Candles first. This decision completely restructured Hughes's vision for the detention quintet. John Cusack was devastated when he lost the role that would have made him a household name. According to production reports, John was incredibly upset that he didn't get the role. The Cusack siblings would have brought a completely different energy to the film, more sardonic wit, less vulnerable teen angst. Instead, Hughes discovered his new ensemble while casting 16 Candles, fundamentally altering cinema history. Joan Cusack would later work with Hughes on other projects, but she never forgot the role that got away. The decision to recast created the perfect storm of chemistry that made The Breakfast Club legendary, but it also left behind a fascinating what-if scenario that haunts film historians to this day. The famous library was actually built inside a gymnasium. Although the entire movie takes place in a library, the library at the school they were shooting in was way too small, so instead, they built a set in the gymnasium. This wasn't just a simple set construction, it was an architectural illusion that fooled millions of viewers. Principal photography took place from March to May 1984 at the shuttered Maine North High School in Des Plaines, Illinois, but the real library couldn't accommodate the crew, lighting equipment, and multiple camera angles Hughes demanded. The production team spent weeks transforming the gymnasium into a convincing library, complete with towering bookshelves, reading tables, and that iconic upper mezzanine where the characters dance. Every book was carefully placed, every architectural detail meticulously planned. The irony wasn't lost on Hughes. He was creating fake knowledge spaces to tell authentic stories about teenage identity. The set became so convincing that visitors to the school during filming genuinely believed they were seeing the actual library, not a complete fabrication built for the cameras. John Hughes wrote the entire script in just 2 days. Hughes didn't just write The Breakfast Club quickly, he channeled pure creative lightning. Working in his trademark manic style, he locked himself away for a weekend and emerged with a complete screenplay that would define a generation. But this wasn't casual writing. Hughes drew from his own traumatic high school experiences, specifically a detention he served that haunted him for years. He remembered the suffocating silence, the way students from different social circles sized each other up, the unexpected moments of vulnerability that emerged from forced proximity. John Hughes' first draft of the film was originally scripted out to be a 2-hour movie. However, many of the scenes were cut out and the negatives destroyed. The original version contained deeper explorations of each character's home life, extended sequences showing their different social worlds, and more explicit depictions of the abuse they suffered. Hughes's rapid writing process captured something raw and immediate. The script feels like an overheard conversation rather than constructed dialogue. This spontaneous creation method would become Hughes's signature, but it also meant that crucial scenes were lost forever when the film was trimmed for theatrical release. The most emotional scenes were completely improvised. The scene in which all characters sit in a circle on the floor in the library and tell stories about why they were in detention was not scripted. Writer and director John Hughes told them all to ad-lib. This wasn't just improvisation, it was therapeutic breakthrough captured on film. Hughes created a safe space where his young actors could channel their own painful experiences into their characters' confessions. Anthony Michael Hall drew from real academic pressure he'd faced. Ali Sheedy tapped into genuine feelings of social isolation. Molly Ringwald explored the suffocating expectations placed on popular girls. The raw emotion you see isn't just good acting, it's real vulnerability being processed in real time. Hughes filmed multiple takes of these confessions, each one revealing different layers of pain and truth. Some of the most powerful moments came from the actors responding authentically to each other's revelations, creating genuine human connection that transcended the artificial boundaries of filmmaking. The result was something unprecedented in teen cinema: actual teenagers speaking their own truths instead of reciting adult writers' imagined versions of teenage experience. Judd Nelson's method acting nearly got him fired. Nelson didn't just play John Bender, he became him, and the transformation terrified everyone on set. He stayed in character between takes, antagonizing his co-stars with the same intensity he brought to the screen. Cast members complained that Nelson would verbally assault them during breaks, using Bender's psychological tactics on real people. Molly Ringwald found his behavior particularly disturbing, especially during scenes that required vulnerability. Nelson would improvise cruel comments that weren't in the script, pushing his co-stars to genuine emotional breaking points. Hughes initially encouraged this method approach, believing it would create more authentic reactions. But when Nelson's behavior began affecting the mental health of other cast members, production supervisors had to intervene. Security personnel were briefed on the situation. Nelson was warned that his contract could be terminated if he didn't dial back the intensity. The irony was perfect. An actor playing a troubled teenager was creating real teenage trauma on set. Nelson later admitted that he had difficulty separating himself from Bender's pain and anger, allowing the character's dysfunction to bleed into his real-world interactions. The performance that made him famous nearly destroyed his relationships with his castmates. Molly Ringwald fought to remove a deeply uncomfortable scene. Molly Ringwald wanted John Hughes to cut a specific scene from The Breakfast Club, and her reasons reveal the darker undertones of 1980s filmmaking. The scene in question involved Bender looking up Claire's skirt, a moment that Ringwald found degrading and unnecessary. She argued passionately with Hughes that the scene undermined Claire's character development and sent a harmful message about consent and respect. This wasn't just an actress being difficult. Ringwald understood something about the scene's implications that the adult filmmakers had missed. She recognized that teenage girls in the audience would internalize the message that sexual harassment was acceptable if it came from a charismatic bad boy. Hughes initially resisted, arguing that the scene showed Bender's immaturity and desperation. But Ringwald persisted, pointing out that the film never adequately condemned Bender's behavior or showed real consequences for his actions. The battle over this scene reflected larger issues about how teenage sexuality was portrayed in 1980s cinema. Ringwald's victory in getting the scene altered demonstrated her wisdom and maturity, qualities that often went unrecognized in young female performers. Her instincts about the scene's problematic nature proved prescient as audiences later re-examined the film's treatment of gender dynamics and consent. Anthony Michael Hall's breakdown was real. Hall's portrayal of Brian Johnson's academic pressure wasn't just convincing acting, it was a young performer processing his own psychological crisis. Hall was simultaneously dealing with intense pressure from his own parents about his acting career while portraying a character crushed by parental expectations about grades. The parallel proved overwhelming. During Brian's confession about contemplating suicide over a failing grade, Hall's emotions became genuinely uncontrollable. He wasn't just remembering lines, he was expressing real desperation about the impossible standards he faced in his own life. Hughes recognized what was happening and kept the cameras rolling, capturing authentic psychological breakdown instead of performed emotion. Hall later revealed that he had experienced genuine suicidal thoughts related to the pressure of being a teenage actor supporting his family financially. The scene where Brian discusses his parents' inability to accept failure resonated so deeply because Hall was living that exact experience. His castmates were moved to tears not just by his performance, but by their recognition that he was sharing real pain. The irony was devastating. A teenage actor was having a mental health crisis while playing a character having a mental health crisis, and the cameras captured every moment of genuine anguish. The dance sequence almost didn't happen. One of the Breakfast Club's most iconic moments, the impromptu dance party in the library, was nearly cut from the film entirely. Hughes initially worried that the sequence would undermine the movie's serious exploration of teenage angst. Studio executives argued that the dancing felt frivolous and disconnected from the film's emotional core. But the cast fought hard to keep the scene, recognizing its importance as a moment of pure joy amid the psychological intensity. The sequence represented something crucial, teenagers being allowed to just be teenagers without the weight of their problems crushing them. Emilio Estevez choreographed much of his athletic dancing, drawing from his real-world sports background. Ali Sheedy's eccentric movements perfectly captured her character's quirky outsider status. Nelson's aggressive dancing style reflected Bender's need to dominate every situation. The music choice, We Are Not Alone, by Carla DeVito, wasn't originally planned. Hughes heard the song on the radio and immediately knew it was perfect for the scene. The spontaneous quality of the dancing matched the song's uplifting energy. When audiences first saw the sequence, they erupted in cheers, proving that the cast's instincts were correct. The dance became a defining moment that showed these characters transcending their labels and connecting through pure human joy. Paul Gleason's Principal Vernon was based on real tormentors. Gleason's portrayal of the authoritarian Principal Vernon wasn't just villainous acting, it was a calculated revenge fantasy against every adult who had ever abused their power over teenagers. Hughes drew Vernon directly from his own traumatic experiences with authority figures who used fear and humiliation as educational tools. Gleason researched the role by interviewing teachers and administrators known for their harsh disciplinary methods. He discovered a pattern of adults who projected their own failures and frustrations onto vulnerable students. Vernon's psychological warfare tactics, the deliberate attempts to break down student self-esteem, the pleasure he takes in their suffering, were based on real administrators Hughes had encountered. Gleason brought his own experiences with authoritarian figures to the role, channeling memories of military instructors and demanding directors who had tried to break his spirit. The result was a character so authentically menacing that many viewers recognized Vernon as someone from their own educational nightmares. Gleason's performance was so convincing that he received hate mail from audience members who couldn't separate the actor from the character. Teachers complained that Vernon made their jobs more difficult by reinforcing negative stereotypes about educators, but Hughes defended the character as necessary. Vernon represented the institutional forces that crush teenage spirits and perpetuate cycles of abuse. The famous fist pump ending was a last-minute addition. The iconic final shot of Bender walking across the football field and raising his fist in triumph wasn't in the original script. It was a spontaneous moment that became one of cinema's most memorable endings. Hughes was struggling with how to conclude the film. The script ended with the characters simply leaving detention, but test audiences felt unsatisfied. They wanted some sense of victory, some indication that the day had genuinely changed these teenagers. During the final day of shooting, Hughes noticed the late afternoon light creating dramatic shadows across the athletic field. He asked Nelson to walk across the field while the crew experimented with different shots. Nelson improvised the fist pump as a gesture of defiance and triumph, Bender claiming victory over the system that tried to break him. Hughes immediately recognized the power of the image and called for multiple takes from different angles. The Simple Minds song, "Don't You Forget About Me," wasn't originally planned for that moment. Hughes added it during post-production, and the combination of music and image created perfect emotional synchronicity. Go ahead and like and subscribe because we're just getting started with the secrets that Hollywood tried to bury. Ally Sheedy was high during the dandruff scene. Sheedy's bizarre behavior during the scene where she creates a snowfall of dandruff on her paper wasn't just eccentric character work, she was genuinely under the influence. The actress later admitted in interviews that she had experimented with substances to help her understand her character's outsider mentality. The dandruff scene, where Sheedy's character Allison creates artwork using her own scalp flakes, was improvised while she was in an altered state of consciousness. Her giggly, disconnected delivery and the surreal quality of her movements weren't just good acting, they were authentic documentation of someone experiencing reality differently. Hughes noticed something unusual about Sheedy's behavior, but chose to keep filming, recognizing that her unconventional state was producing exactly the kind of unpredictable energy he wanted for Allison. The scene became infamous among fans for its strange intimacy and uncomfortable humor. Sheedy's willingness to be genuinely vulnerable and weird on camera helped establish Allison as the most mysterious and unpredictable member of the group. Her altered state allowed her to access a childlike creativity that made the character feel authentic rather than performed. The scene remains one of the film's most memorably uncomfortable moments, precisely because Sheedy was operating without her usual inhibitions and social filters. The school was actually haunted. Principal photography took place at the shuttered Maine North High School in Des Plaines, Illinois, and the abandoned building came with more than just empty classrooms. Cast and crew reported unexplained phenomena throughout the production, doors slamming shut on their own, voices echoing through empty hallways, and cold spots that appeared without explanation. The school had been closed for several years before filming began, and local rumors suggested that a former student had died in the building under mysterious circumstances. Molly Ringwald reported feeling an unseen presence during night shoots, particularly in the library set built inside the gymnasium. Security guards hired to watch the equipment overnight refused to patrol certain areas of the building alone. Equipment malfunctioned in specific locations with no technical explanation. Nelson claimed that Bender's anger felt more authentic in the building because the space itself seemed to amplify negative emotions. Hughes dismissed the supernatural claims, but admitted that the building's atmosphere contributed to the film's psychological intensity. The empty hallways and abandoned classrooms created a perfect backdrop for characters confronting their own isolation and fear. Whether or not the building was genuinely haunted, the psychological effect on cast and crew was undeniable. Everyone felt like they were intruders in a space where teenagers had once suffered through their own forms of detention and punishment. John Hughes kept the only complete copy. John Hughes has stated that he has the only complete copy of The Breakfast Club on film. This wasn't just a director being protective of his work, it was a strategic decision to control how the film would be remembered. The original cut contained scenes that Hughes felt were too raw and personal for public consumption. Extended sequences showed each character's home life in devastating detail, Brian's parents fighting about his grades, Claire's mother coaching her on manipulation tactics, Bender's father physically abusing him. These scenes were so intense that they made test audiences uncomfortable. Studio executives worried that the complete version would receive an R rating, limiting its teenage audience. Hughes agreed to cut the most brutal material, but refused to destroy it entirely. He understood that he had captured something unprecedented, authentic teenage pain translated into cinematic poetry. The missing scenes reveal the full scope of psychological damage that created each character's defense mechanisms. Hughes occasionally screened the complete version for close friends and film students, but he never released it commercially. The director's decision to hoard the complete version has created one of cinema's most tantalizing mysteries. Film scholars have begged to see the missing footage, but Hughes took his secret to the grave. The complete Breakfast Club exists somewhere in a vault, waiting for someone to discover it and reveal the full scope of Hughes' uncompromising vision. The actors really did wander the school halls. The cast members were allowed to wander through the school's halls during the day. Apparently, Judd Nelson posing as a teenager befriended some of the students. This wasn't just casual exploration, it was method acting taken to dangerous extremes. Nelson, despite being in his 20s, successfully convinced local teenagers that he was their age and enrolled at nearby schools. He would show up at parties, hang out at popular gathering spots, and even attended classes as a transfer student. His deception was so convincing that he developed genuine friendships with actual high school students who had no idea they were socializing with a professional actor. The other cast members were amazed by Nelson's ability to blend in with real teenagers. He absorbed their speech patterns, social dynamics, and cultural references, incorporating everything into Bender's character. But the deception created ethical complications. These teenagers were unknowingly providing research material for a Hollywood production. Nelson was essentially conducting undercover sociology experiments on minors without their consent. When some of the students later discovered his true identity, they felt betrayed and manipulated. The incident revealed the moral gray areas of method acting. How far should performers go to achieve authenticity? Nelson's teenage impersonation gave Bender an authenticity that purely performed research couldn't provide, but it also violated the trust of real young people who thought they had made a genuine friend. The breaking glass sound effect was Hughes's biggest regret. John Hughes later said that his biggest regret about this film was using the breaking glass sound effect. This wasn't just a minor technical disappointment, it represented Hughes's perfectionist anxiety about a single false note undermining the film's authenticity. The glass breaking sound was meant to punctuate a moment of emotional breakthrough, but Hughes felt it was too heavy-handed and artificial. He worried that the obvious sound effect would remind audiences they were watching a constructed narrative rather than witnessing genuine human interaction. The regret consumed Hughes because he prided himself on creating seamless, emotional experiences. He believed that even minor technical choices could destroy the delicate spell that transformed actors into believable characters. The sound effect represented everything Hughes feared about Hollywood's tendency to over-dramatize authentic moments. In his mind, the real emotional power came from subtle human behavior, not manufactured cinematic emphasis. His obsession with this single sound effect revealed his deeper anxiety about maintaining credibility with teenage audiences. Hughes understood that young viewers were incredibly sophisticated about detecting adult manipulation and phoniness. The glass-breaking sound felt like exactly the kind of obvious movie trick that would make teenagers roll their eyes and disengage from the story. His regret about this tiny detail showed how deeply he cared about respecting his audience's intelligence and emotional sophistication. Molly Ringwald's real life mirrored Claire's perfectly. Ringwald wasn't just playing a popular rich girl, she was processing her own complicated relationship with fame and social expectations. At 16, she was already a recognizable face from 16 Candles, dealing with the weird dynamics of being famous among her peers. Like Claire, she was seen as privileged and perfect, but felt trapped by others' expectations and assumptions. Ringwald used Claire's confession scenes to explore her own feelings about being labeled and categorized. She understood the pressure of having to maintain a flawless image while secretly struggling with normal teenage insecurities. The diamond earring that Claire gives to Bender wasn't just a prop, it was Ringwald's own jewelry, something she had received as a gift from a wealthy admirer. The gesture felt more authentic because it represented her own complicated relationship with luxury and privilege. Ringwald's performance captured the exhaustion of being constantly on, always having to be charming, always having to look perfect, always having to represent an idealized version of teenage femininity. Her scenes with Nelson crackled with real tension because she was genuinely frustrated with young men who saw her as a prize rather than a person. The authenticity of her performance came from her genuine understanding of how social hierarchies create prison cells for everyone, even those who seem to benefit from them. Claire's evolution throughout the film mirrored Ringwald's own growing awareness of how fame had both elevated and isolated her from normal teenage experiences. The janitor's scenes were cut but changed everything. The original script included extensive scenes with Carl the janitor that revealed him as the film's secret philosophical center. These deleted sequences showed Carl observing each character, understanding their pain, and offering quiet wisdom about the cyclical nature of high school social dynamics. Carl had attended the same school decades earlier, trapped in the same social hierarchies, and recognized how little had actually changed. His conversations with Principal Vernon weren't just casual workplace banter, they were profound discussions about the educational system's failure to nurture human potential. Carl understood that these 5 teenagers were just the latest victims of an institutional machine designed to sort, label, and limit young people. The janitor's perspective provided crucial context about systemic problems that transcended individual character flaws. He had watched generations of students pass through the same detention room, facing the same pressures, making the same mistakes. Carl's wisdom came from his unique position as an invisible observer. Students ignored him, teachers dismissed him, but he saw everything. The deleted scenes revealed that Carl was actually the most educated person in the building, holding advanced degrees but choosing custodial work to stay close to young people who needed guidance. His conversations with the detention students provided hope that adults could understand teenage struggles without judgment or condescension. The decision to cut these scenes left Carl as a minor character, but his original role would have positioned him as the film's moral compass and voice of hard-earned wisdom. The script's original title revealed its true message. Before becoming The Breakfast Club, Hughes's script was titled The Lunch Bunch, a name that revealed the story's deeper themes about nourishment and hunger. The original title emphasized how these characters were starving for authentic connection, genuine understanding, and emotional sustenance that their families couldn't provide. Each character suffered from a different form of malnourishment. Brian was intellectually overfed but emotionally starved. Claire was materially wealthy but spiritually impoverished. Bender was tough on the outside but desperately hungry for love and acceptance. The lunch metaphor extended throughout the script, with references to what the characters ate, how they ate, and what their food choices revealed about their home lives. Hughes understood that sharing food was one of humanity's most basic bonding rituals, and he wanted to explore how teenage social hierarchies prevented authentic nourishment and connection. The Breakfast Club concept emerged during rewrites, but it carried forward the same themes about hunger and feeding. The film's most important moments happen when characters share something genuine, whether it's food, stories, or emotional vulnerability. The title change from lunch to breakfast also suggested new beginnings, fresh starts, and the possibility of transformation. Hughes recognized that breakfast represented hope and potential, while lunch suggested something more routine and predictable. The evolution from Lunch Bunch to Breakfast Club reflected the story's movement from hunger to satisfaction, from isolation to community, from despair to cautious optimism about human connection. The cast's real relationships mirrored their characters. The chemistry between the five leads wasn't just good acting, it reflected genuine friendships and tensions that developed during filming. Nelson and Ringwald's antagonistic screen dynamic was rooted in real personality conflicts that created authentic friction. Estevez and Hall bonded over shared experiences as child actors dealing with industry pressure, much like their characters Andrew and Brian connecting over parental expectations. Sheedy remained somewhat aloof from the group, maintaining an outsider status that perfectly matched Allison's social isolation. The actors' real-world relationships informed their character interactions in ways that scripted dialogue couldn't achieve. Nelson's tendency to push boundaries annoyed his castmates, but it also forced them to develop the same defensive mechanisms their characters used against Bender. Ringwald's frustration with Nelson's behavior translated into Claire's authentic irritation with Bender's provocations. The romantic pairing between Estevez and Sheedy emerged from genuine attraction that developed during filming. Their on-screen chemistry was rooted in real feelings. Hall's position as the group's youngest member mirrored Brian's role as the academic achiever, trying to prove himself to older, cooler peers. These authentic relationship dynamics created layers of subtext that made every scene feel lived in rather than performed. The cast didn't just play characters, they became a real social group with its own internal politics, alliances, and conflicts that happened to be captured on film. The film almost had a completely different ending. Hughes's original ending was far more ambiguous and philosophically complex than the triumphant finale audiences saw. The script's initial conclusion had the five characters leaving detention with uncertainty about whether their connection would survive Monday morning's return to normal social hierarchies. There was no promise of lasting friendship, no romantic resolutions, no sense that their revelations had fundamentally changed anything. The characters would walk out of the library doors and potentially never speak to each other again, having shared one perfect day of authentic connection that might exist only as a beautiful memory. Test audiences hated this ending, feeling cheated and emotionally manipulated. They had invested in these characters' journeys and wanted some assurance that growth was possible, that change could last beyond a single Saturday afternoon. Hughes struggled with this feedback because his original ending was more realistic. Most profound experiences don't lead to permanent transformation, and high school social pressures often overwhelm individual moments of connection. But he also recognized that his teenage audience needed hope, not just authentic disappointment. The compromise ending suggested possibility without guaranteeing outcomes. Bender's triumphant fist pump implied victory, but the film still left questions about Monday morning unanswered. The decision to provide hope rather than harsh realism ultimately made The Breakfast Club more powerful and enduring, giving audiences permission to believe that understanding and connection could transcend social boundaries, even if such transformations remained fragile and difficult to maintain. Bonus fact: here's the secret that even the most obsessive Breakfast Club fans don't know. Shermer High School wasn't just a fictional setting, it was John Hughes's therapeutic reconstruction of every educational trauma he had ever experienced. Hughes spent months researching institutional architecture designed to intimidate and control young people. He studied prison design, military facilities, and authoritarian educational systems to understand how physical spaces could be used to crush human spirit. The fictional Shermer High was deliberately designed as a psychological warfare environment, with long, intimidating hallways, harsh fluorescent lighting, and institutional colors chosen to create depression and compliance. Hughes based specific details on real schools where he had witnessed or experienced psychological abuse. The detention room's layout, with its elevated teacher's desk and exposed student seating, was modeled after courtrooms and interrogation chambers. Even the school's name carried hidden meaning. Shermer was Hughes's combination of Sherman, referencing the Civil War general known for total warfare, and schemer, suggesting institutional manipulation. The building itself was designed to be a character in the film, an antagonist that worked alongside Principal Vernon to break teenage spirits. Hughes's attention to these psychological details helped create the claustrophobic atmosphere that made the characters' emotional breakthroughs feel so powerful and necessary. The Breakfast Club wasn't just about 5 kids in detention. It was about young people finding human connection inside a system designed to prevent exactly that kind of authentic relationship. 40 years later, The Breakfast Club remains shocking, not because of its revelations about teenage life, but because of its radical insistence that young people deserve to be seen, heard, and understood as complete human beings. John Hughes didn't just make a teen movie. He created a manifesto about the fundamental dignity of adolescent experience, wrapped inside a deceptively simple story about Saturday detention. The chaos, conflicts, and genuine breakthroughs that happened behind the camera proved that the film's message was real. When you strip away the labels, the social hierarchies, and the adult expectations, teenagers are complex, thoughtful, and deeply feeling individuals who deserve respect and authentic connection. Don't you forget about these secrets, and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking revelations about the movies that shaped our lives. Because in the end, we're all just kids trying to figure out who we really are beneath the masks we wear. We are the Breakfast Club,